They always say twins are equals, born minutes apart, sharing everything from birthday cakes to report cards. But growing up in the suburban sprawl of Naperville, Illinois, that couldn't have been further from my reality. Our street was picture perfect. Think 4th of July flags waving from porches, golden retrievers barking at squirrels, and the ever-present scent of grilled hot dogs every Saturday. Behind all that, though, was a neighborhood buzzing with passive-aggressive gossip and backyard wine-fueled alliances. And in the middle of it all was my family, middle class, Midwestern, and mastering the art of appearances. My dad, Ron, worked in warehouse logistics, big on spreadsheets, bigger on dad jokes. Mom, Cheryl, was a part-time realtor, full-time PTA warrior and coupon hoarder. And then there was me, and my twin brother, Darren. Darren was everything I wasn't. The guy had a six-pack by junior year, hair that never frizzed, and the kind of tan that made people question if we were actually twins. Varsity quarterback. Prom king runner-up, Mr. You're gonna go far, kid, by every teacher who still remembered chalkboards. Me? I was Owen. The other twin. Shelf stalker at the local Rite Aid, proud owner of a 2005 Dell laptop, and future student at a state college mostly known for its squirrels and suspicious cafeteria tacos. If Darren was a Friday night touchdown, I was the Monday morning school bell. But we weren't enemies. Not exactly. We had our moments. We shared inside jokes only twins could understand, like the ability to communicate entire plans with a single eyebrow raise. But the balance was always off, like I was a sidekick in his superhero origin story. The year we graduated, the whole town practically lit up for Darren. Coaches lined up to shake his hand. Random neighbors brought casseroles to celebrate. Mom built an entire Pinterest shrine to his graduation party, while Dad debated renting a mechanical bull. You know, to make it memorable. Me? I just wanted out. College wasn't just my next step, it was my escape hatch. Away from the shadow, the cheerleaders, and the constant, "Oh, you're Darren's brother?" Darren had locked down a full-ride football scholarship to the University of Michigan before Christmas break. Me? I was scraping together FAFSA letters and stocking up on ramen. I'd gotten into Milligan State, no Ivy League glamour, but they had dorms, cheap textbooks, and most importantly, no Darren. Graduation week was a circus. Darren had practice, parties, and parade-level social attention. I had my Rite Aid name tag and a roommate who emailed once to ask if I was cool with bunk beds. Spoiler, I wasn't. The night before the ceremony, Mom was stress-baking star-shaped cookies, while Dad practiced his cool but firm handshake for relatives. Darren and I escaped to the garage roof, our unofficial hangout spot since middle school. Up there, we were just two brothers under a fading sky. Darren was hyped. Bro, tailgates, college girls, road trips, we're gonna kill it. I nodded, pretending I wasn't dreading sharing a Tanks 12 dorm room with a guy who had already asked if he could bring his snake. Literally. Still, it was nice, quiet, peaceful. I didn't know it at the time, but it would be the last moment where everything felt normal. Graduation day hit like a tidal wave of cliches. Blue and silver balloons, awkward relatives, a gymnasium that smelled like popcorn and teenage sweat. My name was called with polite claps. Darren's? Thunderous applause, like he'd just cured cancer with a touchdown. Afterward, it was hugs, blurry photos, and Mom crying into her corsage. At home, the backyard was decked out like an influencer's dream fairy lights, slider towers, a cooler filled with enough soda to give a dentist a heart attack. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for. Gift time. Darren was practically bouncing in his seat, grinning like he already knew what was coming. And to be fair, so did I. He was going to get something big, something Jeep-sized. I just didn't expect how big. Mom handed Darren a small box. Inside, a car key. Everyone exploded into cheers. We all stampeded outside. There it was, parked like a celebrity in our driveway. A brand new forest green Jeep Rubicon, top down, doors off, tires that looked ready to drive over a mountain. Darren jumped in, revving the engine as Morgan Wallen blasted through the speakers like this was a TikTok dream sequence. I stood by the porch, clapping, smiling, heart pounding like a kettle drum. And then my turn. Mom turned to me. Here you go, sweetie. She handed me a small envelope. No bow, no box, just paper. I opened it. A $25 Applebee's gift card and a single lottery ticket. A joke. It had to be. Maybe you'll get lucky, Dad said with a chuckle, completely missing the metaphor he'd just handed me. Darren's friends were already piling into the Jeep, arguing over shotgun. Mom kissed my cheek. We believe in you, Owen. You're going to do great things. I smiled, nodded, said thanks. Then I slipped out the back gate, gift card in one hand, scratch ticket in the other. I sat on the back porch steps. The sun had set. Somewhere in the distance, Darren's Jeep roared as they headed toward Dairy Queen. I took out a quarter from my wallet and scratched the ticket. Loser. Figures. Even my shot at dumb luck had expired. Sam, my best friend since second grade and human embodiment of a meme, plopped down beside me with 2 Cokes. So, Jeep, huh? Yup. He cracked his can. At least now you don't have to give anyone rides. I laughed. A real one. We sipped our drinks and watched the stars blink to life overhead. I didn't say it out loud, but something cracked inside me that night. A tiny fracture, deep and silent. And the funny thing about cracks? They spread. The party raged on without me. Somewhere inside, Darren's Jeep playlist was blasting another country heartbreak anthem, while half the senior class crammed sliders into their mouths and took selfies under fairy lights. Meanwhile, I was sitting in the backyard with a Coke in one hand and a losing lottery ticket in the other, wondering how a person could feel invisible at their own graduation. Sam nudged me. You sure that ticket's a bust? Pretty sure, I muttered, flipping it over. Feels like a metaphor. He snorted. Metaphor for what? For being the spare twin. He didn't argue. Just tapped his can to mine and said, here's to spare parts. Later that night, after the last of Darren's friends stumbled out and the fairy lights buzzed off one by one, I microwaved a slice of leftover pizza, flopped onto the couch, and opened Instagram. Darren had already posted a pic of the Jeep with some deeply profound caption like, new ride, new roads, new memories, hashtag Jeep life, hashtag blessed, hashtag whatever. I rolled my eyes and liked it anyway. Force of habit. Just as I was about to switch over to Netflix and drown my feelings in reruns of The Office, a text popped up from Sam Bro. For real. Check the back of that ticket, just in case. I sighed, pulling it from the crumpled Rite Aid receipt pile in my hoodie pocket. It wasn't even one of the flashy ones. Just black and white with a cartoon money bag and the words Mega Millions. Probably bought at the gas station with the broken fountain machine. Still, I opened the state lottery app. Just to humor Sam, my phone's camera scanned the barcode. It froze, loading. Then, congratulations.$5 million. I blinked, shook my phone, did a double take, $5 million. I stared at the screen like it might explode. There's no way. It had to be a glitch. Or a prank, or both. I scanned it again. Same result. Holy, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the hum of the fridge. Sam texted again. Well? I typed back, dude. You're not gonna believe this. But even as I hit send, I didn't believe it either. It took me 3 full laps around the kitchen, 2 more scans, and a Googled article about what to do if you win the lottery before I sat down and realized this was real. I had $5 million, more money than I'd ever seen, touched, or imagined. I couldn't even process it. I mean, I still had a used iPhone with a cracked screen and a debit card that trembled every time I tried to use DoorDash. And now, I could literally buy a penthouse and eat lobster with gold flakes for breakfast. But instead, I was staring at a soggy slice of pizza and wondering what the hell to do next. The articles all said the same thing. Don't tell anyone. Not even your family. Not yet. That part was easy. Darren would have told the entire state of Illinois before breakfast. Mom would have treated it like a fundraiser and handed out wish lists like we just launched our own charity. Dad? He'd probably use it to pay off the mortgage, replace his golf clubs, and invest in municipal bonds like a responsible adult. And me? I needed space, quiet, a plan. So I hid the ticket, folded it carefully, and slipped it between the pages of the most boring textbook I owned. Advanced calculus, concepts, and problems. Not even a thief would touch that willingly. Then I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, adrenaline buzzing through me like caffeine. Everything had changed, but no one knew it yet, and I wasn't sure if that made me powerful or just completely alone. The next morning, I lied, told my parents I had an early shift, pulled on my Rite Aid polo, drove past work, and went straight to the bank. I walked in like I was a regular person, like I didn't have $5 million burning a hole in a math book back home. I asked for a private banking appointment. The guy behind the desk looked me up and down like I was lost. Then I dropped the phrase lottery winnings, and suddenly everyone's posture changed. An hour later, I had a new account, a financial advisor named Darren, yep, same name, and a welcome packet. I didn't understand half of, but I nodded like I did because that's what rich people probably do. Next came the lawyer, confidentiality agreements, tax advice, warnings. Then a phrase that stuck with me: this is life-changing money. Treat it with respect or it'll destroy you. They said it like it was a riddle, but it felt more like a prophecy. That night, I came home with a new sense of calm. I wasn't mad about the Jeep anymore, because I didn't need a Jeep. I could buy the dealership. Still, I wasn't stupid. I didn't start throwing money around. No new Rolex, no Vegas trip. Instead, I dipped a toe, ordered new clothes online. Nothing flashy, just stuff that fit right and didn't smell like budget detergent. Upgraded my phone, quietly replaced my crumbling laptop, and traded in my '07 Civic for a used Tesla Model 3. When I pulled into the driveway, Darren was in the garage tossing a football with two of his friends. He glanced over, smirked. "Whose ride?" "Mine," I said. He squinted. "You Ubering now?" I shrugged. "Something like that." He nodded, clearly satisfied. "Cool, man, just don't dent it." I smiled. "Oh, Darren, you have no idea. Weeks passed. I lived this strange double life. To everyone else, I was still the quiet twin with a minimum wage job and secondhand sneakers. But I was quietly building something behind the scenes. I met with my financial advisor regularly, learned about stocks, mutual funds, low-risk portfolios, invested in a clean energy startup that sounded too good to be true because it was, in the best way possible. The company took off. My investment tripled. 5 million turned into 8. I stayed low, played the part, smiled at family dinners, laughed at Darren's jokes. But inside, I was rewriting my story. Not just living in his shadow, but building something he'd never see coming. And then it happened. The night the dam cracked. It was a Friday. I'd just gotten back from a concert in Chicago Post Malone. Floor seats. Unreal. I was still riding that high when I pulled into the driveway and saw the lights on in every room. Strange. I walked in, expecting chaos, but instead found my parents and Darren, all three of them sitting on the couch, silent, serious. Darren was holding something in his hand. My hoodie. My old one, the one I left behind 2 days ago. And from the front pocket, he pulled out a folded document. My latest investment report. He held it up with a grin that could slice glass. "Hey, Owen," he said, eyes gleaming. "Care to explain how you've got a 6-figure investment account with zero explanation?" I froze in the doorway. Darren dangled the paper between his fingers like it was some big reveal on a reality show. My stomach dropped. I didn't even need to look. I knew what it was. My investment summary: Tesla shares. Clean energy startup. A 6-figure portfolio with my name on it in bold, black ink. My secret wasn't a secret anymore. "You went through my stuff?" I asked, trying to play it cool, but my voice cracked halfway through. Darren shrugged like he'd found a half-eaten candy bar in my hoodie instead of evidence that I was sitting on more money than any of us had ever seen. I was cold. "It was in the laundry basket," he said, like that explained it. Mom looked at me like she didn't recognize the person standing in front of her. Dad had his calculator face on, eyebrows tight, lips pursed. The same face he used when reading water bills or arguing with Comcast. "Owen," Mom said carefully, "where did you get this kind of money?" I stared at them, at the couch we'd all grown up on, at the family photos still clinging to the wall like everything was normal. And I realized this was it, the moment everything changed. I sat down slowly. My heart pounded like it wanted to escape my chest. There was no way out of this without blowing it all up. "I won the lottery," I said finally. That ticket you gave me at graduation? It wasn't a joke. Dead silence. Darren blinked. Like, scratch off? I nodded. 5 million. Dad's mouth actually fell open. I don't think I'd ever seen that before. Not even when Darren threw a football through the living room window freshman year. Mom looked like someone had hit pause on her whole face. Then the questions started. How much do you have left? Why didn't you tell us? Do you know how reckless it is to keep something like that a secret? I held up my hands. I followed every rule the lottery website gave me. Get a lawyer. Get an advisor. Don't tell anyone. I wasn't trying to be secretive. I was trying to be smart. Dad leaned forward. Son, that kind of money doesn't just belong to you. We're family. We're all in this together. I felt something tighten in my chest. That word again, family used like a crowbar. Darren sat back, arms crossed. So what? You just planned to live your best life in secret while the rest of us struggled? You mean like how I worked double shifts at Rite Aid while you got a free ride and a brand new Jeep? He rolled his eyes. You always do this, man. Make everything about what you didn't get. I laughed bitterly. Yeah, must be exhausting for you having to hear about someone else for once. Mom tried to mediate. Let's not turn this into a fight. But it was already too late. Because it wasn't just about the money. It was about everything. Every missed birthday, every ignored win, every time they said we're proud of you but only meant it for Darren. I stood up. You know what's funny? That Jeep in the driveway cost more than my first semester of college, and you all handed it to him like he earned it. You gave me a lottery ticket as a gag, and somehow I came out ahead. No one spoke. Darren looked away. Mom blinked rapidly, trying not to cry. Dad cleared his throat. We could really use some help right now, Owen. The water heater's gone. Credit cards are maxed. If you contributed even a little, I shook my head. I'm not your backup plan. Silence again. But this time it wasn't awkward. It was final. I packed my bags that night. Didn't slam doors, didn't shout. Just moved through the house quietly, one drawer at a time. There was no apology, no begging me to stay. Just the soft creak of floorboards and the echo of everything we never said out loud. Darren didn't come out of his room. Figures. I tossed my last duffel into the Tesla and pulled out of the driveway without looking back. The same street I'd grown up on suddenly felt too small, like trying to live in a memory that didn't want me anymore. The next morning, I leased a small apartment downtown. Exposed brick, weird plumbing, and a view of the L train that rattled the windows every 15 minutes. But it was mine. Every square foot was freedom. I bought a used couch, a real coffee maker, and a shower curtain that didn't smell like mildew. I didn't tell anyone where I moved. Not even Sam. Especially not Sam. One needed space. Time to think. To figure out who I was now that I wasn't someone's twin, someone's disappointment, someone's afterthought. And let me tell you, it was liberating. No family drama, no Darren, no constant comparisons. Just peace. I spent the next few months building. I diversified my investments, sat through boring financial calls, bought partial ownership in a startup out in Austin that made software for remote schools. Their tech took off during a post-pandemic education boom. Boom. Another 7 figures. I didn't buy yachts. Didn't throw money at nonsense. I bought time, choices, control, things I'd never had before. Meanwhile, back home, the cracks started showing. The Jeep? Totaled. Darren tried drifting in a Target parking lot to impress a girl. Spoiler alert, he hit a cart return. Mom and Dad? Knee-deep in debt? Turns out financing a Pinterest party and Jeep payments without a plan isn't sustainable. Who knew? Darren's scholarship? Gone. Academic probation and a failed drug test will do that. I watched it all unfold from the quiet of my studio apartment, sipping overpriced lattes and scrolling through Facebook like it was a soap opera. And when the calls finally came, I let them go to voicemail. All of them. Until one day, I picked up. It was Mom. Her voice was different, tired, soft, worn down. Owen, she said, like she hadn't just ignored me for 18 years. We need help. She listed off everything. The mortgage, the electric bill, groceries. Darren couldn't find a job. Dad was working overtime. She was scared. Then Darren got on the line. His voice wasn't cocky anymore. Look, man, he said, I screwed up. But we're still brothers, right? I swirled my iced coffee with one hand and stared out over the river. Right then, I could have said yes. Could have wired them money. Could have been the bigger person. But I remembered that night on the porch. A Jeep revving into the night. And a $25 gift card in my hand. I smiled. Maybe, I said, you should have believed in me when it didn't come with a check. Then I hung up. But the story doesn't end there. Because a week later, my phone rang again. It was Grandpa. Hey kid, he said, voice warm like always. Just checking in. Your mom told me some things. I waited, bracing myself. But he didn't scold me. Didn't guilt trip. He chuckled. That ticket, the one your mom gave you? I bought it. Slipped it into your card last second. Had a feeling about you. I didn't say anything, couldn't. My throat was tight. He continued. They saw Darren as the star. I always knew you were the fire under the surface. A pause. You didn't get lucky, Owen. You finally got seen. After Grandpa's call, I just sat there, phone still warm in my hand. Silence pressing against the walls of my apartment like fog. I stared at the skyline, Chicago blinking back at me. Lights scattered across the river like a million second chances. He believed in me. All this time, it wasn't about the money anymore. It never really was. It was about finally being seen. In the weeks that followed, something in me shifted. I didn't rush to get revenge. Didn't post flashy Instagram updates or show up at my parents' house with a Tesla and a tux just to prove a point. That wasn't me. Instead, I got quiet, focused, intentional. I leaned into solitude. Morning walks by the river, coffee brewed in silence, audible books on investing and human psychology. I devoured knowledge like I was starving, because I was hungry to build something of my own, something no one could take credit for, no one could belittle, no one could blame on Darren's leftover glow. I started journaling again, nothing poetic, just honest. Pages filled with memories, realizations, goals, like how Mom always used my birthday card to write a paragraph and Darren's to tape in cash, or how I'd gotten used to being introduced as Darren's brother before my own name ever left their lips. I wrote it all down, burned through 2 notebooks in a month. And somewhere in that mess of scribbles and self-reflection, a plan began to form. I didn't want to just be rich. I wanted to be free. So I started investing not just in stocks and companies, but in myself. I hired a life coach. A real one. Not the Instagram kind with recycled TED Talk quotes, but someone who actually listened, challenged me, called me out. Her name was Lila. Mid-30s, brutally direct, no nonsense. First thing she said to me, money's just a loud microphone. If you're lost, it'll amplify the confusion. She was right. She didn't teach me how to budget or how to pick ETFs. I already had people for that. She taught me how to rebuild my voice, piece by piece, how to sit in silence without resenting it, how to look in the mirror and not see the version of me that was always waiting for permission. And once I found that voice, I started using it. One night, I opened a blank document on my laptop. At the top, I typed Project Sparrow. No one knew what it meant, not even me at first. But it felt right. I started writing a mission statement, not for a business, not yet. Just a vision. A place for overlooked kids, underdogs, the quiet ones, the ones who work 2 jobs and get forgotten anyway. I wasn't trying to start a nonprofit. I wasn't trying to go viral. I just wanted to build something that would have changed my life 5 years ago. So I rented a small space in a strip mall 2 blocks from my apartment, painted the walls myself, put in cheap but sturdy desks, refurbished laptops, a shelf of books that had helped me breathe again. I didn't need investors or committees. I just needed a key. Within a month, Sparrow Room was open. Free tutoring, college prep help, job interview coaching, quiet spaces with snacks and Wi-Fi where you could just exist without someone yelling at you to do something useful. No fanfare, no press. Just a handwritten sign in the window. And every week, more faces showed up. One girl came in to study because her brothers always hogged the family computer. A guy my age who'd dropped out of college after his mom got sick came to work on his resume. A single mom asked if her son could come by after school so she could work a second shift in peace. I said yes to all of them. No questions, No judgment, just yeah, come in. That place became more than a room. It became an answer to a question I didn't know I'd been asking for years. What now? Meanwhile, back in suburbia, things weren't looking so shiny. Darren moved back home. No scholarship, no job, just TikTok videos of him vibing through the setbacks. Mom was working weekends again. Dad looked like he aged 10 years in 6 months. And still, they never called again, not once. Not even to say sorry, which hurt more than I expected, but not enough to pull me back in. Then, out of nowhere, Sam called. Not a text. A real phone call. "Dude," he said, breathless, "tell me you're near a screen. Like now." I spun around in my desk chair. "What's going on?" He sent a link. Video, Facebook Live. It was Darren, holding up a sign in front of my old high school. It read, "My brother abandoned our family after winning the lottery." What the? "He's doing a live stream," Sam said. "Says you owe them, that you turned your back on your roots." He's got, like, 12,000 views. I clicked. There he was, Darren, looking every bit like a sad reality show contestant. He was pacing, talking into the camera like it was his therapist. "He just left," Darren was saying. "Moved out, bought a Tesla, and now he acts like he's better than us. That money messed him up. We're family. We were supposed to stick together." A few people in the comments were eating it up. Sympathy emojis, comments like "greedy siblings are the worst." But then others started asking questions. Why didn't your parents support him before the money? Wasn't he working 2 jobs while you partied? This sounds like jealousy, bro. The tide turned fast. Darren's live stream ended with him awkwardly trying to explain how we'd always been close before abruptly logging off. Sam called again, laughing. "Dude, that backfired hard." I wasn't laughing. Not because I was mad, but because it didn't even matter. For once, Darren's drama didn't shake my world. It didn't define me. It didn't cost me anything. It just passed, like static. And I was still here, solid, grounded, building something real. Later that night, I locked up the Sparrow room and walked back through the alley to my building. The air was cool, quiet. Streetlights flickered overhead. When I got home, I made tea, sat on my windowsill, watched the city move. And for the first time in my life, I felt light, not because I had money, not because Darren finally fumbled publicly, but because I finally understood something. Revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't throwing money in someone's face or posting thirst traps with captions about leveling up. Revenge was waking up and no longer flinching when you thought about your past. Revenge was freedom, and I'd never felt freer. I thought the drama was over. After Darren's live stream fizzled out and the comment section turned against him, things got quiet. He stopped tagging me on social media. Mom stopped calling. It was like the whole family just collectively decided I didn't exist. And weirdly, I was fine with that. Better than fine, I was thriving. The Sparrow room was growing. I hired a part-time coordinator named Leo, retired teacher, 71, still sharper than most 20-somethings. He brought warmth, structure, baked cookies that somehow tasted like childhood. Every Friday, we ran resume workshops. Saturday mornings, career counseling. And at night, I'd sit at my desk with a notebook, sketching out ideas for expansion. A second location, maybe a partnership with local schools, maybe scholarships. It didn't feel like charity. It felt like building a bridge I wished had been there for me. That kind of peace? You can't buy it, but it never lasts forever. It was a Wednesday when it arrived, just a regular afternoon. I was halfway through scheduling next week's events when the building's front desk buzzed me. "You've got a certified letter," the guy said. "Looks official." I went down. White envelope, heavy paper. No return address, just my full name in clean block letters. Inside, a letter, handwritten, not printed, not typed, and not from who I expected. "Owen, I don't know if this will even reach you. I'm not sure you'll read it, but I'm writing anyway. I'm sick. It's been going on for a while, but I didn't want to say anything until I was sure. Stage 3. It's moving fast. I haven't told your brother yet. I don't think he'd handle it well. He's still, Darren. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For the way things were. For how often I overlooked you. For every time I made you feel invisible. I know now that I did you wrong. And not just with the Jeep, with everything. If you have it in you to visit, I'd like to see you. Love, Mom. My hands went cold. I read the letter twice. Then again. Each time, it hit harder. Not like a punch. More like stepping into a room and realizing it's colder than you thought. That kind of slow, creeping hurt. I didn't know what to do. For the first time in months, my confidence cracked. All that clarity and strength I'd worked so hard for, it wavered. Because this wasn't a story about money or justice anymore. This was family, and sickness didn't care about the past. That night, I walked for miles, down along the Riverwalk, past neon-lit bars, past couples laughing on patios and joggers with earbuds and dogs and sweaters. I kept thinking about all the times I waited for Mom to notice me, to pick me, to say, "I see you, Owen." And now that she finally had, it was because she was dying. That kind of timing hits different. I sat on a bench near a bridge and called the only person I trusted to talk me off a ledge. Sam. He answered on the second ring. "What's up, man?" I told him everything. The letter, the diagnosis, the apology. He didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then, softly, "Dude, I'm so sorry." "I don't even know if it's real," I admitted. Like, what if it's some guilt trip? Some last-ditch manipulation to reel me back in? "Maybe," he said. "But what if it's not?" I stared at the water below. Still, cold. Sam continued. "Look, you don't owe anyone your peace. But if you don't go and something happens, can you live with that?" I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. The next day, I drove back to Naperville. First time in over a year. It felt surreal. Like time had pressed pause on the whole town and then forgot to hit play again. Same sidewalks, same houses, same mailbox shaped like a miniature barn in front of the Hendersons' place. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, the Jeep was gone, replaced by an older sedan with rust on the bumper. I knocked. Dad opened the door. He looked smaller, grayer. Like life had been eating at him bit by bit. He didn't smile, just stepped aside. "She's in the living room." I nodded and walked in. She was curled up under a blanket, cheeks pale, a scarf covering her hair. But her eyes, those were the same. Sharp, bright, nervous. "Owen," she whispered. I sat down across from her, knees suddenly heavy. Neither of us spoke at first. Then she smiled, tired, soft. "You came. I wasn't sure I would. I wouldn't have blamed you." There was a long pause. Then she said it what I didn't realize I'd been waiting for since I was 12. I was wrong. About a lot of things. About you. I looked down at my hands. "You don't get to erase it with one letter." "I know," she coughed, winced, then added, "But I had to try. We talked for hours. Not about the lottery. Not about Darren. Just life. Books we liked. Movies we never watched together. Why she stopped painting. Why I stopped trying. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. And sometimes, that's all you get." Before I left, she took my hand. "I'm proud of you," she said, voice cracking. Even if I didn't say it when it counted, I didn't cry. Not then. But when I got back in the car, I sat in the driveway with the engine off and just let go. The kind of cry that doesn't make noise. Just tears and silence. Not because she was dying, but because she finally saw me. And it had taken all this to make it happen. Over the next few weeks, I visited often, brought books, fresh fruit. Stories from the Sparrow Room. She especially loved the one about the shy kid who found his voice during a mock interview. Dad warmed up too. He even asked me for budgeting advice. Wild. And Darren? He avoided me for the first few visits. Until one day, I found him in the garage, leaning on the hood of the old sedan. "Hey," he said, "hey." Long silence. Then he surprised me. "I was an ass." I raised an eyebrow. No argument here. He chuckled. "I just always thought it would come easy. Life, success. But you earned yours." I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. He held out a hand. We shook. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a moment. And sometimes, that's enough. Back in the city, the Sparrow Room hit capacity. We opened a second location on the west side. Hired a few interns. Built a website. I even gave a TEDx talk short, nervous, and way too many hand gestures, but it went viral. People started asking questions. Who's behind this? Where did it start? And when I told them about the scratch-off ticket, the Jeep, the years of being overlooked, they didn't laugh. They nodded. They understood. Because everyone's been invisible once. And maybe that's why the room stayed full. But that winter, the call came. Late. Quiet. She was gone. The funeral was small. Cold wind, bare trees, and a few clusters of people in black. Faces half hidden behind scarves and sunglasses. The kind of winter morning that makes you feel like the sky forgot how to be warm. She was buried next to Grandma in the older part of the cemetery. The headstone was simple: her name, her dates, a short phrase underneath, always watching, got always learning. Fitting, I guess, because in the end, that's what she did. She watched, she learned, even if it took her too long to say it. Darren gave a short eulogy. He didn't fake it, just spoke from that place people only access when grief finally cuts through pride. She loved loud, he said, voice shaking. Sometimes too loud, but she loved us. Dad stood next. He tried to hold it together, but the words slipped through tears and trembling hands. I'd never seen him cry before. And then they asked me. I hadn't planned to speak, but I did. I stepped forward, looked out at the few faces I used to call home. I used to think, I began, that being forgotten was the worst thing someone could do to you. My voice was calm, measured, but I've learned that sometimes people just don't know how to look until it's almost too late. I glanced at Darren, then at Dad. She found her way back, and I'm glad I let her. I paused. She saw me. In the end, she saw me, and that was enough. Afterward, the reception was quiet. Sandwiches, cold pasta salad, weak coffee in styrofoam cups. Conversations drifted like fog memories, mixed with regrets. Laughter tangled with silence. I stepped outside after a while, needing air. The cold hit fast. Honest. Darren followed. We stood by the parking lot, shoulders hunched, watching the sky shift from gray to a hint of gold. He cleared his throat. So, what now? I don't know, I said truthfully. She wanted you to be okay. You know that, right? I nodded. I think she finally wanted all of us to be okay. He pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket and handed it to me. What's this? She left something for you. In her journal, I opened it. It was just one page. Oh, and if you're reading this, I'm gone. And you're probably doing that quiet thinking thing you do. I just wanted you to know. I was proud of you long before the money. I just didn't know how to show it. You became the kind of man I wish I'd raised both of you to be. Keep building. Keep helping. And don't forget you were never the spare. You were the seed. Mom, I folded the page gently. Put it in my coat. Said nothing. Some things don't need a reply. Life went on. Not in some dramatic movie montage way. Just real. Slow. Honest. Darren started working at a local mechanic shop. Took night classes. Stopped trying to impress strangers online and started figuring out who he was off the field. We didn't become best friends overnight, but we stopped pretending we weren't brothers. That was enough. I poured more into the Sparrow Room, added a counseling corner, started a mentorship program for kids aging out of foster care. We partnered with a tech company that donated laptops. And then, something happened I never expected. We got a call. Netflix. They'd seen the TEDx talk. Read an article someone wrote about the twin who traded revenge for rebirth. They wanted to option the rights. I don't need the fame, I told the producer on Zoom, and I don't care about making myself look good. He smiled. Good. That's what'll make the story worth telling. A year passed, then 2, then 3. The money stayed invested, grew quietly. I never upgraded to a mansion, never bought a boat, just kept the same apartment, same Tesla, same coffee order. Because comfort isn't about price, it's about peace. One spring afternoon, I visited the old neighborhood. Just to see it. The houses looked smaller, the streets tighter, but the memories were still tucked into the cracks in the sidewalks. I stopped at the end of the block, stared at the driveway where the Jeep once sat, and smiled. Not bitter, just full. Because that moment used to hurt. Now, it felt like the prologue to a better story. Mine. Later, I met Sam at our usual spot, Old Diner off Halstead, the one with terrible coffee and fries that taste like childhood. He slid into the booth, grinning. Guess what? What? He pulled out a folded newspaper. Sparrow Room was on the front page. Headline, From Forgotten to Foundation, How One Man's Silent Start Changed a City. I raised an eyebrow. Did you frame this? Bro. I laminated it. We laughed. Loud and real. Then Sam got serious for a second. You ever think, if you hadn't scratched that ticket? I looked out the window. Wind tugged at the trees. The world kept turning. Sometimes, I said. But it wasn't just the ticket. He nodded. No. It was you. I went home that night, turned on some music low, steady, and opened a fresh notebook. Page 1. This story didn't begin with luck. It began with being overlooked. And from that shadow, something stronger grew. I paused. Then added, not louder, not flashier, just real. I closed the book, took a breath, and finally let go of the weight I'd been carrying since the day Darren got the Jeep. Because my story didn't need a bow. It needed truth. And sometimes that's the best kind of ending. Story 2, I refused to purchase my sister a car, so my father threw me out of the family meal. The fragrance of baked mac and cheese, grilled ribs, and my dad's expensive cologne, which he has been wearing since the 1990s, were the first things I noticed when I came into my parents' house. Tonight was just another one of Mom's extravagant family meals. Cornbread, mashed potatoes, grilled steaks, and enough beer and whiskey to keep Dad in what he called his Sunday. Best mood were all on the dining table. Although I already knew how the evening would go, I wish I could claim I was thrilled to be there. It did every time. Lauren, my younger sister, was a golden kid, incapable of wrongdoing, but I was the independent one, which was simply a polite way of stating that I didn't receive favors. Dad, who had already had 2 beers, cleared his throat as I reached for a plate and started to eat the mac and cheese. As if delivering a TED Talk, he declared that Lauren had been doing well at college. Professors at the top of her class think she has a bright future. I nodded, keeping my mouth shut, and took a sip of my beer. The bear doesn't need to be prodded. Mom smiled. Frank, she's been working so hard. She is deserving of all the achievements. Well done. To be honest. However, I was previously aware of this direction. It was an attempt to make Lauren seem like a second coming. In contrast, I was only an extra piece of furniture that annoyed me. It must be difficult to balance employment and education, my love, Dad replied in a tone full of phony pity. I was pondering because of this. I knew it was game time as he turned to face me. Don't you think it's time to lend your sister a hand a bit, Ethan? The setup was there. Lauren was acting when I looked at her. Be taken aback. Come on, though, she's already spoken to them about this. What do you mean? I inquired, as if I was unaware of it beforehand. Dad reclined. He swirled his whiskey. She has been having trouble getting to class. You now have an excellent job. You might be able to purchase her automobile. My drink almost suffocated me. Instead of asking me to purchase her a full automobile, I assumed they would ask me to assist with food or rent. Lauren's display of humility was worthy of an Oscar. It would be so much simpler, even if I wasn't going to ask. Just a young Civic or anything basic. I set my fork down. Do you want me to purchase a car for her? Before I could even reply, Mom intervened. That's hardly a much to ask. You're doing a great job at work, my love. Your money wouldn't even be affected. Yes, of course. Due to the fact that my salary was monopoly money, I gave a head shake. I refused to purchase her vehicle. Quiet. I could see the explosion from a mile away, and Dad's face twitched. Are you serious? I maintained my composure. Yes, I mean it. Without anyone purchasing a car for me, I earned my way through college. Lauren can follow my example if she wants one. Put money aside. I thought Dad's glass would break when he slammed it down so forcefully. Incredibly so. Lauren let out a loud sigh. I anticipated this. I moved my plate out of the way, knew what had occurred. That I wouldn't allow you to exploit me. In an attempt to defuse the situation, Mom placed a hand on Dad's arm. However, he had already gone too far. Ethan, you know what? I'm not sure where our relationship with you went awry. His tone was piercing. Disappointed. You start to be self-centered. You only consider yourself. I laughed a little dryly. Coming from him was rich. Dad gestured toward the door. You can go if you're going to behave in this manner. I glanced at my mother, expecting her to intervene, but she merely sat there. lips pressed together, keeping my eyes out of their way. With her arms crossed, Lauren appeared content, as if she had just prevailed in a silent conflict. I got up and picked up my jacket. Okay then. I left without being stopped. Even though the night air was chilly, it was still preferable to that house. I wasn't shocked at all. It always went like this. I simply didn't think he would go to this extent. I climbed into my car and gripped the steering wheel while I took it all in. They had made their choice, and I had made mine. I wasn't going to be their ATM. Not anymore. I woke up the next morning still feeling the weight of last night's disaster. My dad's words echoed in my head. Selfish. Ungrateful. Only thinking about myself. I sat up in bed, rubbing the sleep of my eyes, but the frustration was still there. I dragged myself to the kitchen, started a pot of coffee and checked my phone. A couple notifications from work. Some emails. Nothing urgent. But then my eyes landed on something I hadn't thought about in years. The shared account with Lauren back in college, when I was still dumb enough to believe that families should always help each other. I had set up that account to give her a little financial cushion if she ever needed gas, money, or emergency cash. I had almost forgotten about it. Something told me to check it. I opened my banking app, scrolled to the account, and my stomach tightened. This was an emergency fund. This was a full-blown lifestyle. Sponsorship, rows and rows of charges, $7.85 Starbucks, $22.50. Ultra, $109.99. Sephora, more Starbucks, more online shopping. Apple Music, a recurring charge for Netflix. My jaw clench as I scroll further. 100 blown-on delivery apps. Grubhub, Uber Eats, DoorDash. Lord had been living like a VIP while I assumed she was struggling to get by. Then I saw it a $600 shirt from some boutique in Law. I let out a short laugh. One of those dry, humorless ones barely getting by. I didn't even hesitate. I went straight to the settings, removed my name from the account, and transferred every lesson into my personal savings. A few seconds later, my phone started buzzing. Lauren, the first, stared at the screen, debating, declined the first call. Buzz declined the second buzz. Third time's a charm. I sighed and finally answered. What the hell, Ethan? Her voice was high-pitched, somewhere between outrage and panic. I just tried to buy something and the car got declined. I pour myself a cup of coffee, keeping my voice even. Yes. I closed the account. Quiet. Then she practically screeched. You can't do that. Oh, I can, and I did. I could hear the dramatic inhale. The kind of huff people do when they're used to getting their way and suddenly don't. You didn't even tell me. I have bills, Ethan. What am I supposed to do? Get a job that covers your lifestyle? I said flatly. You're joking. Dead serious. She let out a noise that was half laugh, half disbelief. Oh my God, you're actually insane. I took a sip of my coffee. Lauren, I've been paying for your nonsense for years. Starbucks makeup, Netflix. I don't know you any of that. Her voice went from pissed to pleading. It's not like that. This month has been hard and I cut her off. Lauren, I went through years of hard months and you know how I dealt with it. I budgeted. Quiet. Then she sighed. Mom and Dad are going to lose it. That made me pause for half a second, but then I brushed it off. Yes, let them. Maybe they can purchase you that automobile. They wanted me to obtain another Charbonneau. So then the call terminated. I sank back in my chair, grasping my coffee mug. The excitement was wearing off, but the irritation was still there. I wasn't the evil person. I wasn't the selfish one. If people want to call me that, great. I was done being their personal bank. Not anymore. The knock on my door arrived earlier than planned. I had just completed my second cup of coffee. I'm still wearing sweatpants and browsing through my phone in an attempt to get rid of the annoyance from yesterday. As soon as the knock was heard, I recognized the person already. Frank was standing there as I opened the door after taking a deep breath. In his typical weekend attire, which consisted of jeans and a flannel, my father always wore a belt that was slightly too tight, as if it were a form of intimidation. He wasted no time. We must speak. We did, of course. I moved to make room for him. The main reason was that I didn't want my neighbors to watch a family soap opera that was about to start. As if he owned the house, he came directly to my kitchen, picked up the coffee pot, made himself a cup without asking, and sat down at the table as if this were just another Sunday morning conversation. I remained upright. Lauren informed me about your actions. My back was to the counter, crossed arms, awaiting the speech. I was fully aware of how things would play out. The guilt trip comes after the letdown, as well as if that failed. The dangers. Do you genuinely believe that this is how you handle your family? Severing your own sister. You are aware of her difficulties, having trouble. I could prove it with the receipts, literally. I just watched him without saying anything. That was something he detested. He wanted me to become defensive, to lose my temper, to play his game. I'm not sure where our relationship with you went awry. It was there. She attends college. Ethan. Instead of stressing about money, she should be concentrating on her studies. I rubbed my temple and moaned. So, why did you spend $600 in a Los Angeles boutique? Spending hundreds on Uber Eats or Starbucks? Or, his face changed, but just for a moment. Then he leaned closer and spoke in that patronizing, paternal tone. It has nothing to do with our expenditures. You're behaving as though you're too good to assist your family. And the guilt trip was there. Ethan, you did a great job. You lead a comfortable life. However, you are unable to even spend a small amount to ensure that your sister has a place to live. My eyebrows go up. She probably already has a place to live. Unless you mean that she is also wasting her rent money? He gripped his coffee mug and let out a strong sigh through his nostrils. You don't understand. Family members watch out for one another. We don't desert one another for a few dollars. A few of dollars. I almost burst out laughing. He sat back as if this were a business discussion and went on. So here's what's going to happen. At the very least, you will pay her rent for the upcoming month or return the money. All I'm asking is that. Inquiring? Correct. I pretended to consider it while tapping my fingers against the counter. You said you would pay for her bills if she required assistance, didn't you? There's something about family protecting one another. He clenched his jaw. I didn't know you would abandon us till then. I laughed a little, without humor. Helping others is therefore a sign of familial loyalty. But I'm the one who is self-centered when I don't. He felt his jaw muscle jerk. With perhaps too much force, he put down his coffee. Ethan, you're doing something wrong. I gave a shrug. Perhaps, but at least I made a mistake. He stood, fiddling with his belt as he often did when he was trying to control his temper. You believe that you are now quite self-sufficient. However, individuals are humorously humbled by life. You will require our assistance at some point. And don't count on us to be there when that day arrives. I saw him walk toward the door. With his expression inscrutable, he turned back after pausing for a second hand on the knob. I'll take care of this myself. As the door slammed, I let out a deep sigh and ran a hand through my hair. Yes, this was not the end of it. Gazing at the vacant area where he had been sitting, I poured myself another cup of coffee. He was in for a surprise if he believed he could make me roll over. A few days later, when I finished my morning coffee, I was half-focused and browsing Craigslist. There was nothing in particular that I was searching for, only passing the time before preparing for work, when I did a double take at something. A familiar-looking automobile. My automobile. I blinked, thinking I had to be mistaken. But no, there was right on the screen. My vintage '08 Mustang, the one I had worked my butt off to get as a youngster. Listed under some generic post titled Great First Car. Well maintained. I clicked the listing, my heart thumping. The photographs verified it. The tiny damage at the back bumper, the bespoke leather seat coverings I had installed in myself. That was my dang automobile. And the seller? Frank. My father. My jaw tightened so tightly my teeth hurt. He didn't even have the decency to say it to me. Just decided that since I wasn't bending to his demands, he'd start selling off my belongings. I grabbed my keys and was out the door in under 5 minutes. The journey to my parents' house was longer than usual, maybe because I was thinking through every potential option. This conflict might go, but I already knew how it would end. I wasn't going without my automobile. I pulled up the driveway, noticing it straight away. There she was, parked out front like a prop in someone else's rummage sale. The sight of that made something clench in my chest. I didn't even bother knocking. I strolled right inside the house where my dad was sitting in the living room, TV remote in hand, like he didn't have a care in the world. Nice listing on Craigslist, the first said. my voice even controlled. He hardly looked up. You weren't utilizing it? Figure someone else could. I gave out a quick laugh, more out of amazement than fun. You figured without asking me. That automobile is mine, Dad. I paid for it. He laid the remote down, finally giving me his entire attention. It's been sitting in the driveway for months. Ethan, you certainly don't need it. I glanced at him, partly expecting some show of guilt. There was none. Just that same old I know best look he had developed over the years. Yeah, well, I need it now. I grabbed the spare keys from the hook by the door, the exact spot they'd always been before you could speak another word. I was out the door and behind the wheel. The engine roared to life, just like it always did. I couldn't help but smile, even through my frustration. I didn't waste time. I reversed out of the driveway and took off down the street before my dad even made it out the front door. It wasn't until I hit the main road that my phone started buzzing. Dad. I ignored the first call, then the second. By the third, I figured I might as well see what kind of nonsense he was about to spew. I answered, You stole that car? I almost laughed. Stole? I took back my own property. That car was in my driveway, under my roof. That makes it mine. That's not how ownership works, Dad. His voice was rising. That deep, authoritative tone he always used when he thought he could bulldoze me into submission. You can't just take it, Ethan. I was selling it. I already had people interested. I sighed, shaking my head. Yeah, well, now they'll have to be interested in something else. There was a long pause then. In a low and more threatening voice, he said, This isn't over. I hung up. Of course it wasn't over. I took the next turn to my apartment, my fingers tightening around the wheel. The Mustang was mine again. But something told me that this was just the beginning of whatever game my father thought he was playing. I pulled into my complex's parking lot and just sat there for a moment, letting my hands rest on the wheel. The familiar scent of old leather and faintly traces of the air freshener I used to keep in here fill my nose. This wasn't just a car. This was years of my life. Long shifts at a crappy job, late nights fixing it up, saving every dollar to afford it. And my dad thought he could just list it online like some junk he didn't need anymore. I laughed into my breath, but it wasn't a happy one. If he wanted to fight, he was about to get one. A couple of days passed, and I was finally starting to cool down from the whole stolen Mustang fiasco. I told myself, I let it go. Move on. No more family drama, no more ridiculous stunts. Then I walked into my apartment and felt my stomach drop. The place wasn't trashed. No broken windows, no kicked-in door. But the second I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. My gaming console gone, my laptop gone, my watches, including the one my grandfather had given me, gone. I stood in the middle of my living room, trying to make sense of it. Nothing else had been touched. My TV was still on the stand. The cheap jewelry I never wore was right where I left it. The kitchen was undisturbed. This wasn't some random break-in. This was personal. I checked the lock. No indications of forced entry. The door had been opened with a key. My fingers tightened around my phone as I scrolled to the one number. I really, truly didn't want to call Frank. I hit dial. He picked up after the second ring, his voice cold like he'd been awaiting my call. Finally noticed I felt my pulse rise. I tightened my jaw so tightly it ached. Where is my stuff? He gave forth a brief, humorless chuckle. I sold it. I nearly dropped the phone. You did what? You don't want to aid family? Fine. Then you don't need all that other things. Someone else can make greater use of it. I grasped the back of the couch, attempting to steady myself. You came into my flat and removed my belongings because I wouldn't pay for Lauren's rent. He didn't even flinch. It wasn't taking Ethan. You're my son. Everything you have. We hope you get one way or another. Don't pretend like you accomplished it all on your own. My eyesight clouded with frustration. I pushed myself to take a breath to keep my voice level. So that's it? You just decide. You can take anything you want, not whatever I want, he said like he was being reasonable. Just what you don't need. You weren't utilizing half of it anyhow. I felt a sudden bitter chuckle rise in my throat. So you're operating a pawn store now? He disregarded the sarcasm. You're overreacting. It's simply stuff. If you want anything back, you can buy it again. Maybe with the money you should have spent to aid your sister. That was it. That was the final straw. I breathed gently, my hands shaking as I pushed myself to keep calm. I'm done. He didn't even hesitate. Yes. With what? With you. With this? You wish to take for me? Fine. But don't expect me to come running when you need something. Quiet. Then a sneer. You'll come back around. You always do. I ended the call. My whole body was strained. My hands holding the phone so tight I feared it could fracture. I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. But one thing was apparent. This time, I wasn't going to let it slip. I sat down, glancing at the empty area where my game system used to be. My laptop held all my business files. My timepieces weren't just accessories. They had meaning. And this wasn't simply some family matter anymore. This was stealing, an actual legal offense. And if my father thought I'd just roll over like I usually have, he was about to have the biggest wake-up call of his life. I sat on my couch, gazing at the vacant spot where my game system used to be. My laptop was gone. My watches, some of them family relics missing. The rage that had been building now spilled over into something clearer. This wasn't simply another round of family turmoil. This was stealing. And stealing had repercussions. I grabbed my phone and did what I should have done. The second I discovered my things was missing, I phoned a lawyer. After a few minutes of describing my issue, the person on the other end gave out a low whistle. Wow, that's a new one, he said, clearly entertained. Most individuals don't have to deal with their own parents doing this scam. I wasn't in the mood for jokes. Can I do anything about it? Legally. He didn't hesitate. Absolutely. You have texts I call log. And the fact that there was no forcible entrance. If your father seized your possessions without authorization, that's stealing. Plain and straightforward. I exhaled. I was aware. However, it struck a different chord after hearing it from someone who truly knew the law. If you file a police report, they will be forced to look into whether it goes to court. He added, that varies though. However, your dad is going to get a reality check if he wants to play this game. I only needed to hear that. After saying thank you, I hung up and promptly dialed the non-emergency police number. It was a fairly easy talk. The officer noted the details and suggested that I temporarily cease speaking with my father. I paused for the first time in my life at that section. I've learned that no matter how terrible things become, family matters remain inside the family. No foreigners were involved. However, this was unique. He took more than a few dollars out of my wallet. He had broken into my house and taken my belongings, treating them as if they were his to do with as he pleased. I hung up the phone, a little less weight in my chest. Then I did something that I never would have imagined doing. I gave my dad a call. Before he picked up Ethan, it rang twice. He sounded flat, as if he were preparing for a brawl. I wasted no time. I reported it to the police. Quiet. Then a chuckle. You didn't. Yes, I did. I could practically hear his mind working. Is it truly your intention to put our family through this over a few devices? My jaw tightens at the thought of my property being taken and sold without my permission. Yes, I am. A pause occurred. And I thought I heard something fresh in his voice for the first time in a long time. Fear! He abruptly changed to his sickly sweet voice and said, Listen, son, let's speak with reasonableness. The cops don't need to be called. Let's have an adult conversation about this. Even though he couldn't see me, I shook my head and leaned back. Before you choose to sell my belongings behind my back, that was a choice. Then he exhaled deeply. All right, what are you looking for? It nearly made me chuckle. He made no attempt to refute it. Didn't attempt to deceive me. Change the narrative and give me the impression that I was exaggerating. He was well aware of his actions, and he was scurrying now that the repercussions were serious. I want my money back. Now, every penny you earned from selling my belongings. The magic words came after yet another lengthy silence. All right, I'll forward it. A few minutes later, I checked my phone, and sure enough, there was a notification about a transfer. Every single dime. I believe the prospect of real legal action was enough to frighten him straight, even if I half expected him to attempt to short me. My chest finally became lighter. I wasn't naive, but I had won this round. This was not the end of it. I got up, went to the kitchen, and poured a glass for myself. The stolen electronics and the Mustang. The guilt-tripping years. Everything was building to a climax. My father detested the fact that he could no longer control me. and I had a feeling he wasn't finished attempting to retrieve it. I was making decisions only for myself for the first time in my life. No remorse or hesitation. Somewhere far from the disaster I left behind. Just myself, my own road, and a new beginning. After a week, I started looking at out-of-state locations, packed up my apartment, and worked for 2 weeks. Texas. Too warm. New York. Too costly. I finally touched down in Colorado. Reasonably priced rent, a strong employment market, and above all, a distance that prevents anyone from dropping by. I kept it a secret. No notice, no farewells. They only found out when I abruptly ended my lease, closed my previous phone number, and vanished. I felt as though I could breathe for the first time. My new life was calm and quiet for several months. I had a new apartment, a new job, and no unexpected guests. No texts that are passive-aggressive. No continual self-blame about how I wasn't providing for the family. Suddenly, there was a knock on my door. I opened it after hesitating. Nobody in this place knew me well enough to stop by without warning. There was no clear indication of my address. My mother appeared smaller than I had recalled as I pulled the door open. The self-assured, always in control lady I had known growing up was gone, replaced with a woman who appeared exhausted. She wasn't invited in. She inhaled nervously. "Please, Ethan, we must speak. That old side of me." The portion that wanted to listen had spent years trying to make him a decent son. "I had learned my lesson, though. How did you discover me?" I asked in a steady tone. Inside, she paused. Lauren, a private investigator, was the person she hired. I blinked. What did she do? Mom's lips were squeezed together. She was in a difficult situation. She's expecting a child. "Ethan, what about your dad? He lost everything. The house, the company. Everything is gone." I didn't respond. I simply stood there, taking it all in. She must have thought that I was hesitating because she reached out and grabbed my arm. "Ethan, we need you. Come home, please." I moved away from them. "Do you imply that you require my money?" She flinched. "That isn't the case, but we were both aware of it." I shook my head and let out a deep breath. For years, I was the family's financial support system, going above and beyond to be there for you all. You stood by and let my father to sell my belongings. When I eventually stood up for myself, she winced. "It wasn't me, it was your father." I looked her in the eyes. "And you allowed it to occur." There was silence between us, hefty and thick. She finally let out a sigh and rubbed her temple, as if she were the one who was worn out by everything. She acknowledged that we made errors, but Lauren is afraid. She's about to be a mommy, and she has no one. Your father? He's not the same man anymore. He's broken. I didn't doubt that. Losing authority over everyone around him surely seemed like the end of the world. But it wasn't my problem anymore. I crossed my arms. That's not my duty. Her lip twitched. "Ethan, we're still your family." I let out a quick laugh. Funny. I don't recall feeling like family when you let Dad kick me out of that dinner, or when he attempted to sell my vehicle, or when he broke into my apartment. She had no answer to that. I sighed, sliding a hand down my face. "I'm not coming back, Mama. Not now, not ever." She wiped at her eyes, nodding stiffly. I had to try. And with that, she turned and went away, vanishing down the corridor. I closed the door, leaning on it as I let out a slow breath. It was actually over. And for the first time, I didn't feel terrible about it. The stillness was refreshing. Mom says passed since I last heard from my relatives. No guilt-tripping phone calls. No backhanded statements masked as concern. Last-minute crises are not convenient. Need my financial support for the first time. That was all I had. Mine. My phone then buzzed. I look at the screen, thinking it may be a friend's message or an email from work. It was Lauren instead. "I really need to chat, Ethan. Please. It's crucial." I throw my phone on the counter after locking it. I would have given up everything a year ago. Called her back right away. Let her explain to me how difficult things were and how she only required assistance once. Then, as usual, I would have been the one to make all the necessary corrections while she benefited. However, it was back then. My lesson was over. Over the following few days, the messages continued to arrive, each one more urgent than the one before it. "There's nowhere else for me to go. My big brother is you. That means something to you, doesn't it? I have no idea what I will do." I was aware of her intentions. The same strings she always had were pulled. Those strings had been severed, which was the issue. But a part of me was hesitant, because even though I had made a lot of effort to break away, a tiny part of me still wished she had changed, that this was more than a simple attempt to control me. I thus took action that I hadn't taken in months. It was there when I looked at her social media accounts. In between the nebulous motivational sayings, like forgiveness releasing you and family being forever, there were pictures of her dining out, purchasing designer-looking rather than functional baby things, and a brand new stroller that most likely cost more than my first vehicle. Additionally, she informed her pals in a comment that her brother was too self-centered to support his own family. I only needed that assurance. Her number was blocked by me. If there were any remaining family reunions, I could already picture how the story would be told. Ethan left his sister, who was pregnant, behind. Ethan abandoned his loved ones. Ethan's just interested in himself. However, none of them had visited. I woke up that night wondering if I would ever be more than a family ATM. They had all pretended I was doing well as they watched me struggle, because requesting assistance would only result in lectures about how difficult their situation was. Beyond what I could offer, none of them had shown any concern for me, and suddenly I was really free for the first time in my life. It was 6 months later. In Colorado, I created a life that was unrelated to them. Instead of knowing me for what I could do for them, my new acquaintances recognized me for who I was. Rather of waiting for the next calamity to be cleaned up, I spent my weekends hiking, seeing new areas, and living my life. Cooking was one of my new interests. I had never really had time for it before. I found that I truly loved cooking, not simply quickly preparing meals in the microwave in between hard shifts. Sunday mornings became my time to pick up fresh products, talk to sellers, and try new things after I discovered a fantastic small farmer's market down the road. Before I started coming to the gym again, I had never allowed myself to appreciate such a minor pleasure. I took care of myself because it felt wonderful, not to impress others. I really had the energy to invest in my own health since I wasn't always exhausted by other people's troubles. Dating also felt different. I had never had the mental room to connect with someone before since I was so consumed with family problems. I was at last in a position where I could concentrate on myself. And to my astonishment, in reality, people liked me for who I was rather than what I could provide. For once, I wasn't someone's fallback option. I wasn't a safety net for anyone. I was myself. And it was amazing. If I said I never gave them any thought, I would be lying. I would occasionally be reminded of home by someone. A foolish joke, a tune, or a scent. My dad would have been the only one to chuckle, and I would briefly question whether I had made the proper decision. Then I recall the sensation of freedom, and I would know I had.